I'm not in a great place. I'm working on it. And I've also kind of like strayed away from my spiritual practices, like everything that mattered. And even, eating a certain way, my discipline is gone. And I guess this is all grief and some depression, I would say.
Welcome to Partners in Sublime, where we explore the teachings of depth psychology and Vedic philosophy to achieve the highest levels of personal growth and self-actualization. Join me as we tap into the unconscious for intuitive guidance and creative direction. I'm your host, Shagun Chopra. Let's begin. Hi everyone, welcome to today's episode of Partners in Sublime. Today we're going to talk about why we abandon ourselves. And abandon is a strong word. It evokes this emotive feeling. Like I feel abandoned when somebody is not taking care of me despite me really needing them. Or, you can feel abandoned when you show up to catch a plane and at the last moment you're told you can't fly. All these are ways in which we feel like, somebody just really let us down in a moment where we really needed them to pay attention to us. So take that concept of abandonment and apply it to yourself. When have you done that to yourself? When a part of you really needed you, but you chose to ignore them. Sometimes consciously, sometimes unconsciously. But for whatever reason, this part of you must feel so wronged that you didn't show up for them. Now, there can be multiple ways in which we abandon ourselves, but I'm going to focus on the two that I think are most relevant. I've mentioned the concepts of persona and shadow in previous episodes, and they fundamentally represent two opposite sides of the same coin. So persona is the face that we project to the world. It's how we want others to see us. And shadow is everything that gets discarded and pushed away because it doesn't make the cut of the persona. Now, as you may imagine, especially in the beginning of life, we are all focused on developing a persona. We want to be seen a certain way. We're trying to figure out like what we want people to think of us. And as we do this work, we are getting heavily conditioned by our family, by our society. We are being told what is acceptable, what is likable, what is rewarded, what is the thing that you need to embody in order to be liked and accepted in society. So you're taking all that in and you're constructing your persona. But there are parts of you that you set aside in order to construct this persona. This is one form of abandonment. You are so focused on creating this likable, acceptable, successful identity that there are parts of you that really want to come through, but you don't let them. That's one form of abandonment. And this one begins much earlier. It starts right from we're growing up and continues to our 20s and sometimes 30s. And for some people, it can go on even longer because they are that much entrenched in what is expected of them. So you're continuing to ignore what you really want to do and abandoning yourself as you construct your persona. And this is a less recognized form of abandonment. We actually don't think that we're abandoning ourselves. We think that we are being what we need to be. We're growing up, we're maturing, we're learning everything that the world wants us to learn and showing up a certain way. The second form of abandonment is actually more recognizable and is what people are typically referring to when they talk about abandoning themselves, which means that they had a set way of being, a set way of approaching their life and showing up, and then they just let go. And they cannot do that anymore. So somebody who is used to working out 6-7 days a week, and that's part of their persona, they suddenly stop doing it. That is what we would think of as abandoning ourselves. But really, both of those, the abandonment that happens in the direction of persona and the abandonment that happens in the direction of shadow, both are our ways of not honoring who we really are. And who are we really? Fundamentally, we are whole and we are unique. We have everything available to us to choose from, and we have to make those choices based on the guidance of ourself, our higher self. But when we make it so rigid that we have to be one way or another, we preclude ourselves to possibilities that our higher self wanted us to realize. And hence, we start living slivers of lives versus living a whole life. And we abandon the parts of us that don't get to make it in this life. They just don't make the cut. So it does not matter if you're abandoning yourself in the direction of the persona, you think you're leaving not so good qualities behind, or you're abandoning yourself in the direction of shadow, where you feel like, you've completely let go of the persona you've built. Both are equally incomplete. Your whole self does not care about persona and shadow. It wants to have access to everything, and it wants to be its own unique person. So let's explain this with some examples. Let's start with the example of a high achieving person. It's easy to start here because I identify with this one quite a bit. But if growing up you come to understand, either you're being told directly or you're inferring this from your environment, that being high achieving and successful and always getting good grades, good jobs, or whatever society considers as the marker of success around you is the way to go, then in pursuit of that achievement, in pursuit of that success, you may ignore some callings you have. You may have callings to have more fun, to slow down, to be silly, to throw caution to the wind and do something different and adventurous. And if you don't honor those parts of you, you essentially abandon them and they don't get to live themselves out. And they just stay there in the shadow, abandoned, rejected, secluded from your conscious identity. But they don't go away, they will come back. So if you're living this high achievement life, your psyche is always trying to guide you back to your whole self. Your psyche will give you these quiet nudges, like maybe don't take on that extra project, maybe do something else instead, or oh, I just don't feel like doing this. And you can honor them and not abandon these parts of you, or you manage this stuff away where you're like, I can't believe a part of me is saying these things. Like, no, that can't be true. The persona is who I am. I'm all about achievement and success and working hard and, scoring those gains. And that's exactly what I'm going to do. So you ignore these calls from your psyche. You essentially, that's the first form of abandonment. And then you go on living your life, but the psyche is still going to force you to be whole. It's not going to let you live this one-sided life. So somewhere down the road, you might experience this utter meaninglessness of like, what have I done? Like, I don't like this life, or I just don't have the drive in me anymore, or I cannot spend another day chasing whatever I thought was success at this job. And you might get to this point of burnout, which is essentially your psyche physiologically, psychologically forcing you to reckon with the parts of you that you have abandoned. And at that point, you might actually have trouble getting out of bed. You might not feel like doing anything. Maybe you're not showing up to work, taking extended leave. Maybe you quit your job entirely with no plan as to what you would do. And that's when you may feel like you have abandoned yourself, but really you were abandoning yourself all along, and this is just in a different direction. And the way out is to get to that central, holy, whole place without living in these extremes of the persona and shadow. Now let's take another example of the people pleaser. I'm going to keep a friend in mind here because she self-identifies as a people pleaser. And when you're a people pleaser, somewhere along in your childhood, you learn that you must be continuously attentive to what others' needs are so that you can feel safe. And it's your help in meeting those needs that makes you feel good about yourself. So you continuously diminish your own needs and you're hyper attentive to what others around you need, and you want to make sure that you provided to them. And that gives you this false sense of satisfaction. So initially, this can seem very rewarding, especially if people around you are not very regulated and they constantly need help. Then you being that person for them can feel like that's your way of fitting into that family or that culture or society. And you learn that, and that becomes your persona. You become a people pleaser as your persona. Now, you keep going on like this, your psyche is not going to be happy. It is going to be like, but I want to do what I want to do. And you will get those calls. So, in case of my friend, she was telling me once that when her boyfriend and her go to a grocery store, he always buys this brand of milk that she doesn't like and it doesn't sit well with her. But she doesn't say anything because she doesn't want to be rude and she doesn't want him to not have something that he enjoys. And so she just goes along with what he's doing. And that's just a small example, but this was happening in many aspects of their lives, like where they live, who they hang out with, and what they and the things they buy for their home. So her psyche would quietly nudge her and be like, but I don't want to drink this milk, or like, how come I don't get to do what I want? And thankfully she was paying attention to these calls, and she's doing a lot of work on getting over her people pleasing to get to a more balanced, true and whole version of herself. But there are times people don't pay attention to these little nudges from the psyche that pull us away from that extreme toward the whole center. And we continue to ignore them. We continue to abandon these needs. And we get to a point where one day we do something that's completely uncharacteristic. This loyal, people pleasing person, and this didn't happen to my friend, but I know of people that it has happened to, they have devoted the whole relationship to pleasing the other person, to meeting their needs, that one day they either just get up and leave, or they have an affair, or they do something so different from how they've been. And it's just a psyche's attempt to balance itself to get your attention. And when they do something like that, they judge themselves so harshly. They will be like, I cannot believe I did that. They are not happy with the shadow taking over. And it's understandable. That's not who they see themselves as. And that's why they feel like in that moment they've abandoned who they used to be. But really, as I've said before, they've been abandoning themselves all along. So I know this quote is a bit extreme, and this is one from my beloved James Hollis. But if you compare just how much hurt abandonment causes, and for a while if you just let yourself compare it to death, Hollis says that death is not the only form of dying. Living partially, fearfully, is our common daily way of dying. It is this living partially that I'm referring to as abandonment, because you're not really letting a part of you live, a part of you that really wants to live. And most of us are so conditioned, we don't even recognize that we are doing this. We continue to abandon this part of ourselves. We continue to lead one-sided lives until the big switch arrives where your psyche has had enough of living of the persona. And that's the abandonment we recognize. In Vedic terms, if you think of this from the perspective of the three gunas, and gunas are these quintessential qualities that make up all of matter around us, there is sattva, rajas, and tamas. Sattva is the state of clarity, of calmness, of balance. And rajas is the state of activity, of going after things, of engaging in motion. And tamas is inertia, stagnation, darkness. So sattva can be arrived at by balancing rajas and tamas, or it can be arrived at by pushing rajas and tamas away and not even acknowledging them. If you acknowledge that there's a really active go-getter part of you, and then there's a part of you that wants to rest and be lazy and just enjoy and not have anything to do, and you find the middle ground between them, as you would if you were balancing on a seesaw, which is a concept from Robert Johnson's book, Owning Your Own Shadow, then that is your way of really honoring all parts of you to be in the whole. But if you just cut yourself off from the desire for rest, then the rest will take over. Because as you're building up this side of the seesaw and being very active, this side is gaining energy. And someday the seesaw will flip and you will find yourself not being able to do anything. And that's not an ideal state either, because then you have traded one side for another. But what you really want to do is honor both sides and be in the middle and operate from that holy middle place. I would say that there are as many forms of abandonment as there are personas, because each of us finds a unique way of being in the world, and then we reject parts of us that don't fit in with that mold, and we continue to do that often throughout the first half of life. So now we can transition to today's coaching session. This one is with someone I'll call Anna, and you'll see how her story illustrates both these forms of abandonment that I just talked about. So listen on, and I will see you on the other side. Conversations on Partners in Sublime are for educational purposes only and do not constitute medical or psychological advice or treatment. Please consult a licensed professional for any mental health concerns. Hi, Anna. Welcome.
Hello, thank you.
So, what made you want to talk today? What's on your mind?
Well, I've got a lot of grief going on. Recently, my mother passed away, so it's been a grief that was somewhat expected, and it's not as hard a grief as, like losing my brother was. But I've also had grief from losing the guy that I called my father a couple years ago. I've been in therapy for that, and that's been going on for 2 years. And like a year ago, I remember thinking, okay, it's been a year, I've got to be done with this. Things are looking up. And then, it's just been a lot of anger. And I'd say that a lot of the anger I've never really had before. But in the last 2 years, I've definitely experienced more anger than I even knew I could actually feel. And like I cuss like a sailor, mostly in my own presence, in my car, at the TV, at the person who I'm angry with. And I know it's not even in any kind of spiritual DNA that I've lived or studied. Yeah, so now that my mom has passed, I feel a little softer, but where I feel stuck is that, I put some things on hold that really mattered to me, and that was my career. And, I'm doing a career that I've done for like 32 years, which is massage. And, and I'm really good at it. So I've been keeping up certain things, paying for things, and yet I'm not doing anything. Like my website, like my scheduler, things like that. And I'm like, why am I paying for this every month and I'm not doing anything? So I've been sort of in a lull, and I broke up with my boyfriend a couple years ago also, pretty much at the same time. So yeah, I've just been, I feel like it's time to like move on from this energy and this, anger and place. And it's hard to make decisions. Like a part of the decision is just, I live on an island. So my decision is, where do I want to live for the rest of my life? Or, where do I want to put some roots? Do I want to stay here? Do I want to go back to the mainland? And so, I used to be able to make decisions easily and just do them. And, so I'm just in a place that I'm not comfortable with. It's just kind of fuzzy. I'm not in a great place. I'm working on it. And I've also kind of like strayed away from my spiritual practices, like everything that mattered, and even eating a certain way. My discipline is gone, and I guess this is all grief and some depression, I would say, So that's kind of a lot. I don't know what to really focus on, but
No, it is a lot, and I can only imagine how much it feels like that you're dealing with. There's the grief, there's the unresolved anger, there's a sense of losing touch with your spiritual practices and not being able to decide. Like, you really don't feel like anything like what you used to be maybe 2 years ago. And lots of changes have happened. You've lost people, you've lost your partner, like lost that relationship. So, there is a lot of places that we could start with. But I think the one that is standing out the most to me is when you described yourself as, having anger that you didn't know you were capable of having. And when that happens to people, it usually tells me that they have lived a life where being angry was not okay. And now all that piled up anger is coming out. Does that feel true for you? Especially as you were part of like a spiritual path or maybe in your family, was anger just like a complete no-no where you were?
Not in my family. I mean, my mother had a temper. So, I mean, I saw her get angry and my growing up years, they argued, my parents. And so there was a lot of that. And I'm sure that's what I emulate in my relationships to some degree. Where it wasn't allowed was my spiritual path. I lived in that spiritual community and was part of the spiritual community for 15 years, but I lived in it for like 10 years inside, the organization. And it was very much an organization, which was, a certain way of being. And a lot of the things that we lived in practice were all good things, but I did sort of get rid of them in a sense, let them go because I wanted to be able to come back to a place that is mine and not forced on me. Like, this is the way you need to think. This is what you need to say. Like, when somebody dies, the first thing I hear from people from my spiritual community is, well, they're in a better place. And nothing like, how are you doing? How are you feeling? It's like, yeah, I already know they're in a better place. Like, I know all that. It doesn't make it easy for the people that are left here. And I just don't understand that. That makes me angry.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I have some anger against the people, not the people, but just the way of life. Like, that is just not, I don't know, human in some way. It's like, okay, well, we can live a spiritual life and rise above things, and we have tools to do that. And I haven't really utilized my tools. For some reason, I just felt like it just was like overwhelming. It just took over.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I was trained to know that, anger can destroy lives. And yeah, it's a little bit of a path of destruction. And while I was living this anger for the last 2 years, I was still working and striving and put on a happy face in public and around friends. But yeah, in my private world, I was suffering. I'm angry. I'm sitting on this couch and just sometimes sitting here for hours.
Let me ask another question. You said that it was easy for you to make decisions earlier and just do things. What time of your life are you referring to? Was that when you were part of the spiritual community or some other time?
I would say no. I mean, but when it came to like moving, like I'm here on this island because I came here for that relationship, and I have this little tiny place, and it's been a nice refuge for me during the pandemic, even during the relationship. And still it is now because it's quiet and it's small. I don't have a lot to do to keep it up, but it's also feeling like a suitcase. And part of me wants to go back to the mainland because I miss my family, and my mom just passed. And now it's like, well, I was going to like try to spend more time there, and she's gone. And now I'm like, oh, that whole thing I was working towards to save money so I could spend like a month at a time every 2 or 3 months, now that's kind of out the window. But, I still have a son, and he lives, 5,000 miles away. And I just want to like figure out how I can keep part of my life here and part of my life somewhere else. I just can't seem to do things right now just because I've allowed myself to unravel. I don't feel like I'm together.
Yeah, unraveling. It's such a tricky and difficult process, and you're in the middle of it. So I appreciate you acknowledging that. I'm sure there's many layers to it, but like one simple thread that I see through your story is that the spiritual community was not accepting of people's emotional experience, especially anger, there's a tendency to be like, she's in a good place, like, you're spiritual, you're a divine soul. Like, what do you mean you're feeling some type of way? You should just be in bliss all the time. I'm exaggerating, but that's kind of the message you get. And then it was also rigid. You said it had its, practices and schedules, all things that you wanted to do, but somebody was telling you that, this must be done every day, every week, or whatever those things were. So you go on 10, 15 years doing that way. Understandably, there's a part of you that's like, finds that very confining, doesn't like this. And so you are now indulging that part and saying, yeah, you can sit on this couch and cuss and be angry and do whatever or cry. I don't care. Nobody's watching me. Nobody's censoring my emotions. And you also want to be more free-spirited, not necessarily have those routines and rituals because, you overdid them for a long time in your mind. So you're compensating. And what happens when we do this is like, one, it's very gratifying to start with. There's this like sense of freedom that, you can be and do. But if it goes on long enough, which is where I feel like you're starting to get to that point where you're like, okay, I've indulged this side of mine, but I want to get the reins back. I want to decide it's like, I just don't want this thing to take over my life. Does that feel true?
Yeah, I'm very much in that place now. I'm watching, there was a class I took for business, and, in the class, I felt like, the instructors and some of the students kind of looked up to me like they thought I was like ahead. And now I'm seeing one of my friends in the business class, she's, excelling, and I'm like, well, wow, you've really done a lot. And I feel like I've backpedaled and put everything on the side, and it mattered so much to me. And I'm, not a spring chicken. I'm not in my 30s. I'm not even in my 40s. So, as I approach, I'm in my late 50s now, and it's like, I still feel so young inside. So I try not to worry about the age thing, but it's there, and where do I want to put roots? So I'm kind of in like a time to make decisions and really, get on with it. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel the sense of desperation that might be building up.
People don't always see, but I know for myself that I'm doing things that just aren't really in alignment with what I need to be doing.
I know you keep saying that you've let things go, but when I'm hearing them, I think you've let things express that were repressed for so long. I'm not denying that you need to get a handle on them, and there needs to be like the master puppeteer that manages all parts of your psyche. But the more restricted a life you've led, the more likely it is that you will want to do those things, because we're all born whole, and then we get thrown into places or in situations where we can only live like a sliver of everything we contain, and then the rest of us is just sitting there gathering energy, and it's ready to erupt. It's going to, and that eruption is happening right now. I think the eruption is destabilizing you because it's not happening in a controlled way. It's like the difference between like a wildfire and a controlled burn, to prevent a fire. So if I could turn back the clock a few years and, none of this had happened, I would be telling you, hey, looks like you've had a very restricted life, very focused on schedules and practices and this like spiritual image and identity, which is very outward. It's time to indulge and give room to some of these things you've suppressed. How can you bring out your anger in a healthy way? How can you bring out your grief in a healthy way? How can you bring out your spontaneity and disregard of rules in a healthy way? So that's a conversation that we would have been having back then. What has happened is, because they weren't consciously unearthed, they've just, taken over. And so now you have to do the same thing. You have to make room for all these parts of you. In fact, if these get excessive as they are, you might even start longing for the parts of you that you don't honor anymore. Like maybe you are craving that routine or craving that spiritual community and so on. So bottom line is, you can't live a life where you only draw upon 25% or 50% of all the qualities that you're born with. So, we're looking to create this whole life. I think you have that awareness that it'll come from you. You need to decide and change. But in making that decision, I think what I would caution you against is doing the 180, very confined, totally like, off the cuff and now. So we call this persona and shadow swap. Persona is how you present to the world. Shadow is everything you have to suppress to be that way. And then it flips. And so now, you become, very, by your standards, like a lot more carefree and maybe not making good decisions, and all that other stuff comes in the shadow. And you can keep doing the seesaw, or you can stand in the middle of the seesaw and claim both these parts and keep them in balance. So,
I think
yeah.
that's true. And I think that's what I've been kind of working on, like talking to myself, like, well, I've allowed this. And, you know, like even my diet, just certain things I've eaten that aren't vegan, which is what I was doing for a while, for 7, 8 years, like, and just kind of not allowing myself to put so many labels on myself. Like, I'm not vegan. Like, I just want to say I eat a plant-based diet most of the time. That doesn't mean I'm completely plant-based. And sometimes I've done things in the last few years to be rebellious against the way of life from where I was before. Also, my son said, well, you're way different than you were when you were raising me. And he didn't say it was good or bad, but, you know, it was like, oh, I need to look at that. I want to look at that because I'm still his mom and he's impressionable and I want to be careful. So, yeah, a part of my next phase of life is, my mom had a house where I would come visit and stay as long as I want or as little as I want. And I don't really have that for my son. I have this little studio. So it's like, I want to have that for my son. I want to have a place for him to come if he needs to come and stay and things like that. And just be more of the stability that he had growing up.
Yeah, I think you have such good intentions of what you want for yourself, the way you want to serve others and your son. And like all of us, obstacles have arisen in your way. It happens to everybody. The obstacle is the way, you have to go through it. So I feel like you already have access to a lot of inner wisdom. And I think you're at that point where you're like, you can start taking action like now. But there is something that is stopping you from just doing it. Do you have a sense of what that might be?
Well, I mean, it's on an energetic basis from what I know about myself and things. I've just sort of become a little weary of body, mind, of just the things I've been doing to cope. And I have the tools. I know that they work. And so sometimes I sit down at my altar and I meditate. Like, I meditated last night, but I didn't do my Kriya. I just sat and it was like, okay, you don't have to do anything. You don't have to do Kriya. And I used to think, I have to do my Kriya every day and I have to do this many Kriyas and all of that stuff. So yeah, I've just been talking to myself about, I have free will. It's my choice and I could do it or I don't have to do it. I think it's just the way of life that I lived before was so rigid. And this goes back to like when I was a child. I was naturally very disciplined and very kind of rigid. I was a ballet dancer. And I remember in my 20s, I started learning belly dance and it was completely opposite of ballet. And I
Yeah.
didn't like being rigid. I didn't like that about myself. Like even my drawers were so clean on the inside. So I allowed myself to have like a messy drawer. And so I just started like allowing myself to be messy at times. And that helped me a lot. And now I'm missing that. And so, yeah, it's like you said, coming into the middle and not being so hard on myself.
Yeah. I like what you said about, going from ballet to belly dancing. Like, I have some dance training myself, and they are really so opposite. In ballet, you have to like, pull your stomach up, be all tall, and then belly, you just like let it go and shake it out.
Exactly. It's
And
completely
so,
opposite.
and that was an intentional choice. Like, allowing yourself to have a messy drawer was an intentional choice. And like you said that was good for you, but you're not saying that about this time in your life because these choices have crept up, but they haven't been intentional or modulated in a way that they integrate. They've just, the seesaw has turned and the other side is up now. And you're like, okay, how do I, bring it back in balance? I think a little visualization here might help. Are you open to closing your eyes and trying that? Okay, let's do that. So try to get yourself in a relaxed stance. Want to deepen your breath a little bit. So do a long exhale, deep inhale. Try to connect with the witness consciousness in you. For the next few moments, you're simply observing. Now I want you to create an image in the left side of your field of the way you used to be. Just give it some visual form and see what emerges. Notice what has emerged. Notice how this version of you looks, how this version of you feels, and stay present with that version. Now in the right side of your imagination field, try to summon the version of you that you have come to be in the last 2 years. No judgment, you're simply witnessing. Notice how she looks, how she's feeling. Let yourself observe her. And now I want you to take a few steps back in your imaginary field so you can see both these versions of you together. You're simply witnessing them. Let go of any attachment and just see what happens in this image. Keep your eyes closed and tell me what you're seeing.
So the one on the left is energetic, strong, capable, loving, clear, nurturing, also disciplined, but also a free spirit. But there's a time where it wasn't. And then on the other side, more lately, just a little more kind of look the same. Don't like my looks have changed, but just feeling tired and weary and not really in charge, just going with the flow, which I've done in both places, but not really, just cloudy or I don't know, messy, just not as I don't know, I'm strong, but not as strong internally, like strong physically, I feel even stronger than I've ever been physically in a sense, but not strong spiritually, not, a little weak or just weary. I think that's the word that keeps coming up, just weary of life. I feel like I'm a little like lost. Yeah, the emotions have taken over and clouded me, clouded my spirit, just heaviness. Yeah, that's what it is.
Is there any interaction happening between these two versions
Yeah,
of
I
you?
mean, there was this sort of sense of the left side, I guess you're talking about the past, that person saying, you know what to do, you have the tools, you've been through so much, you've been, lost before, you've been beaten down, always a father, like just had like 2 or 3 fathers in my life. And I'm not saying they beat me, but just beaten down by the emotions of the loss, of the rejection, of the abandonment. Those are the issues that I come with. And yet, and even to this day, I feel like she's saying, you know, you don't need them and you know what you need to do. You just need to get on with it. You have the tools.
Yeah. Did you get any response from the current version of you? Did she have anything to say?
Yeah, I think that it's just going to take a little time. Like, I just need to take one day at a time and try not to be so hard. If there's some setbacks, I mean, just telling this person that I am right now, just one thing, one day at a time, like clean the fans, above the bed or clean the windowsills. Just, I've just allowed things to like, get a little messy. So, um, I see her cleaning her way out of it, and then maybe something will shift. Like there's just stuck energy around me, That's what I'm feeling.
Yeah.
Like clean the windows, like something like just doing that may help me. I don't know.
So this part of you is very much in the I'm not opposed to doing, but I'm going to do it at my own pace, one thing at a time. I'm not ready for an avalanche of big changes right away. And
Yeah, I mean,
the
I
left
still feel
side
very
of,
tender. Yeah, from my mom
hmm
passing. And
yeah.
in that tenderness, I do feel a little more open than I have been. Can I open my eyes now? I think I think my soul or my body or my mind wanted to just go through this because I didn't want to do the spiritual bypass. Maybe that's what this is about. And I say spiritual bypass because that's what a lot of people do where I used to live. And oh, everything's fine, you know. How's your day? Oh, I'm well, thank you. Because we're taught to tune into your soul, tune into your spirit, and forget all the other stuff. But it's like we're human. This is like, how can you forget all this stuff? And I think this apartment, that I have, this place, this space, even though it feels really yucky right now, probably because it's been raining so much, it's allowed me to like be more human. And also, there was a part of me that used to be kind of judgmental about people who lived a certain way. Even my own mom, people that I absolutely loved, I would be sometimes like, why do they have to do that? Why can't she just do this? And then here I am, so I think there's a lesson in that. And that's what just came clear to me. That was a really good visualization. So thank you.
Yeah, you're very welcome. I think I was feeling that way too. Like I felt like the former part of you was, yes, indeed quite balanced, but somewhat devoid of this compassion, this witnessing of someone's tenderness. Because when the left side of you turned toward the right side, there wasn't a sense of like, I see you struggling. I know, like, there was like cheerleading basically. Like, you can do it, you have all the tools. And I think you saw yourself do that and you're like, this part doesn't need that right now. This part is very tender. It just needs to make small changes at their own pace. And I don't want more judgment right now. Like, this part of you does not want judgment right now. And it extends to you and extends to your attitude toward others too. And if you don't mind, just close your eyes for a couple more minutes and be with this current part of you, the one you visualized on the right side. Just see her, see how overwhelmed she's feeling, see how much grief she's holding, how much she's had to suffer all her life, but especially in the last 2 years. This part of you is not some rebel for the sake of rebelling. This part of you is holding a lot of grief.
Yeah, it's a lot. And, I've just kind of been doing it on my own because, yeah, I don't know how to get rid of this. I mean, I think it takes longer than you think. Like after a year, I was like, okay, I should be done with this. And now it's been 2 years. Okay,
Yeah.
I want to move on. But, does it really just completely go away?
What if you didn't have to get rid of it? What if this part of you can just stay and is there? And whenever it's too tender, you tend to it and then you come back in the center.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I think that's what happens in life. You have to kind of keep plugging along. You can't spend years working on it and do nothing else. But yeah, you have to like live your life, right?
Yeah, I guess what I'm suggesting is not that you pretend and just like go on bulldozing through your life anyway. I think what I'm saying is that all of your stress right now is coming from resisting this part and wishing that it just gets its act together and changes. But if you just accept it, that a part of you is so hurt and so wounded and is coping with that in these ways, you could still change if you wanted because the other part of you is still there, it's not gone away. But then you're not spending all this time judging this side of you. You just accept this side. Like, I feel like giving this part a hug, not a talking down. That's what it needs.
Yeah, I just feel a little bit like a walking wounded soul. Yeah, that's what it feels like. Just, my heart. And I'm a grown woman, so I'm not like a little girl. Yeah, the little girl inside of me feels wounded.
One last time, close your eyes for me, and this time this little wounded girl. We're gonna ask your higher self for guidance in the form of a symbol, the deepest, truest part of you, the part that's divine. We're asking this part for a symbol to guide this little girl, to give her what she needs. Just see what symbol emerges. Have that symbol. You can thank your wise higher self, and you can take a deep breath and open your eyes. What symbol did you get?
Well, my little childhood favorite thing was a unicorn. So I saw this like unicorn head. I had unicorns everywhere.
Yeah. What does that symbol mean to you?
I feel like it means strength, a connection with divine and power and force, but also remaining connected with the divine. I think it's like a gold, for me, it's like gold, and it's like a light that connects me. And, just connected with all things divine, like our higher self. This unicorn was like a spirit guide or something for me.
Yeah. So, what might you do differently in your life if that's the guidance you're getting from your higher self?
Well, I think what's been happening right now for me, just in this last few weeks, I've been lighting a candle for my mom and also lighting the candle for my guru, and just sitting here. I'm not really sitting at my altar, but just sitting here and just meditating. Been watching NDEs, and those have been really powerful for me because it seems almost better than going to church, because they all talk about dying, what's on the other side, and God and the angels and our connection and what matters the most, which is love. And that's resonating with me. And so right now it seems to be a lifeline for me, getting back to some kind of pathway that's going to pull me out of this slump, this depression or anger. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. We always have the answer within us, and it's nice to know that the part that is wounded is within you, but the part that can take care of it is also within you, and your higher self will never mislead you. The minute you connect to it, you know what to do next. You might not know all the steps ahead, but you know the very next step, and you have that faith that it'll be okay. Welcome back, everyone. Thank you for listening to Anna's session. I know when Anna came in, she thought that she had just abandoned herself. She had let herself go. She was no longer doing the things that she used to do on an everyday basis, and she doesn't even recognize this version of herself. And the reason this version of herself was so unrecognizable is because it was her shadow. It had been there all along, but she was not conscious of it. In our psyche, the persona lives above the surface of our conscious awareness, and the shadow lives below. So she was not conscious of it, and meeting this version of herself understandably feels very unfamiliar, very unsettling to her. And this version of herself was created because for far too long she had maintained a persona that was very constricting. She had developed a spiritual identity and persona where there was no room for anger, no room for grief sometimes, no room for just the humanness of ordinary life. And you live like that for many years, and it's unsurprising that your psyche will revolt. And it's the revolt that is happening now. The shadow has taken over, and Anna can focus on getting back to her persona, but it would be the same problem. What she needs to do is to go to that holy middle place where she's neither identified with the persona and not giving into this shadow. This swing of the pendulum, or if you want to call it the turn of the seesaw, is just her psyche's way of getting her to really look within and to find who she really is before she reaches for one extreme or the other. In the years that have gone by, Anna has perpetually set aside her anger because it was not acceptable in the spiritual community that she was part of. She has set aside her grief because If you're a spiritual person and you believe that the soul lives on forever, then why would you experience grief? These are not things she said directly, but I'm inferring them based on the general context of spiritual communities that I've seen. So it has gathered so much energy sitting in her unconscious that she has now no option but to just let it all come out, and it has come out. But contrast that with some of the examples she shared from her early life. She was a very organized kid, but she allowed herself to have a messy drawer. Or she was a ballet dancer where structure and form is really important, and she allowed herself to do belly dancing where you can really let go and just, jiggle your way through dancing, which is completely unacceptable in ballet. So those are such good ways of honoring your whole self. But what she did in those occasions is something she couldn't do when she was busy leading the spiritual life. And because she was unable to honor these repressed parts of her, they came out all at once. And I would do her a total disservice if I just asked her to slowly manage her way back to her persona. Because if the persona had been fulfilling and represented her true self, then this would not have happened at all. So we're not going to try to go to either of those extremes, but we want to get her to a place where she can reclaim who she really is. In Western society in particular, we don't want to endure suffering. We have so many solutions to make suffering go away and disappear at the drop of a hat. But it is in enduring the suffering that the third way emerges. It's being able to observe the tension of the opposites, of her old self, of her current self, accepting them both, not judging either of them, and waiting in the suffering till a third way emerges. Often we are so disgusted by our shadow, or sometimes we are just so drained by our persona that we just don't want to look at either of them. What we want to do instead is accept them both. They're all parts of you, and they can live and coexist, and they can interact with themselves until the third way emerges. This is what I tried to do in the visualization. I let Anna see and interact with both these forms of her until they were able to communicate in a symbolic way and inch her toward her true and whole self. Now, this process is not going to unfold over a single session or rather quickly. Anna's wounds are deep. The grief of losing family can be such a deep wound and disorient us so much that this suffering is for her to bear. And I will not be able to ease that suffering for her. But it is in resisting our suffering that we cause ourselves even more anguish. And I'm hoping that she can see this state of suffering that she's in as a path toward greater wholeness. And in doing so, the suffering becomes sacred. She can wake up every morning and lament the state that she's in. Or she can recognize that her current suffering is shaping her and leading her toward the person that she was always meant to be. Anna's journey is her own. But let me say something about spiritual communities in general. Each of us adopts our own flavor of spirituality, and no two paths and personas are the same. But generally, if you look at it, and I can say this from my own experience too, that there is a tendency to always be Zen, to always be in this blissful state and not acknowledge some of the human emotions that we all feel. John Wellwood, who was a transpersonal psychologist, he used to live in San Francisco. He was part of a Buddhist Sangha, and he observed this tendency within his Sangha too, where people would use spiritual ideas to avoid doing psychological work. So they think they're progressing spiritually, but they are remaining psychologically more stunted. And by that I mean that they were not honoring the full range of their emotions. And he called that spiritual bypass. And I've seen it in so many places, including in myself. I've shared stories in past episodes where I too got attached to a spiritual identity and started to ignore the messages that my own psyche would try to send me. And spiritual bypass isn't necessarily a problem. We have to understand it in the context of how this world is structured. If we are all conscious beings, as the Vedic texts say, and we are trying to find our way back to that universal consciousness, then in order to do so, in order to accept that everything is made of the same thing, there should be no judgment, because really, who are we judging? But by creating these psychological splits in ourselves, we end up judging parts of ourselves that don't fit in our persona. That's why I feel that shadow work, like being able to loosen the grip of your persona, being able to honor some elements of your shadow, and arrive to this sense of balance in the middle, is the first step to realizing universal consciousness. Because if we're split within ourselves and we can't feel whole, then how can we connect to the wholeness of the universe? So Jung's work, when understood in the context of Vedic philosophy, offers such a beautiful framework for doing this work in order to live the spiritual lives that we are meant to live. And Anna has made so much spiritual progress in her community, which cannot be negated, but it has come at a cost. And it's time to take the psychological, to bring it along for the ride, and go toward a more truer sense of spirituality versus one that is grounded in rules or rituals or formalities or ways of being that don't quite feel right. And in doing so, compassion is the way to go. You cannot critically think your way out of this. You must bring your heart along. So that's all I have for you today. I hope that this moves you to look at all the ways in which you may be silently abandoning yourself without even realizing. I would urge you to be there for all of you, even the parts that seem inconvenient right now, and see what a difference it makes to your life. And you can always reach out to me if you need support in that work. That's where we'll wrap up today, and I'll see you next time. Bye. Thank you for being my partner in Sublime today. I hope you enjoyed diving into the unconscious with me. To ask a question or get coached on the show, visit shagunchopra.com/ask or click the link below. See you next time.